Thank you for joining this conversation about decolonizing education in Africa. It's been a topic, I think it's gained momentum recently. The need for decolonization, and what does that actually mean? So I'll be talking about it from the perspective of my work in Senegal and also just my engagements with other CEOs on the continent. What do we mean by decolonizing through the lens of African entrepreneurs and African students and teachers? So we truly believe in order to empower individuals, communities, and to transform them, there needs to be a need to decolonize. There needs to be an empowerment through cultural relevance. And I'll talk about that and I'll give you a little bit of a context of what is actually happening in many African countries, like I said, through the lens of Teach for Senegal. So for many African countries, we have gained independence, we have our own democratic election, but our colonial system still exists, especially in our educational system. A lot of our educational systems were designed by former colonizers. For example, Senegal is a former French colony, and our educational system was designed by our French colonizers as a means of control. I mean, if you wanted to maintain order and power, you need to control the way individuals think and act. And the best way was to do it through our educational system. Once these French colonizers, once we gained independence, they kept the same system and passed it on to what we now have as African elites who maintain that status quo. So when we say decolonize education, it's actually getting rid of education system that was meant to keep us away from being critical thinkers, problem solvers. It was a system designed to fail. So in many African countries, we are literally fighting against a system that was designed to make us fail at its core. And so that's what we mean by decolonizing education, is getting rid of a system that is not reflective of us and our community and our children. So there's a huge disconnect from our educational system and the needs of children in our communities. And I'll give this in the context of Senegal. So when we have educational reforms, anything that requires education, it is not done in Senegal. It's oftentimes done in other European countries or done with other European or Western countries involved. And there's nobody from the Senegalese government. So I can say that there was an altercation where, I mean, there was an example where a big NGO came up to me and said, I can't believe I'm advising your government on what to teach your children. And that's the reality, is that a lot of our policies, our curriculum is designed elsewhere. And just to put it in perspective, that is like France designing a curriculum for Norway's children, for children in Norway, designing how they learn, how they engage with individuals. So that's just a perspective. I wanted to put in perspective for you of how education and the continent works. And of course, I can go a lot more in depth, but I can go on about it, but just a general overview. There's a huge disconnect with what is happening on the ground and what actually is needed. Senegalese children are required to read and write in French, despite the fact that only 5% of Senegalese children use French at home. Just think about that. You're asked to do everything in French in the classroom, and then when you get home, you're speaking a totally different language, and you're being required to take exams in that language. You're being compared to native speakers when it comes to standardized exams. So it leaves a lot of African children at a disadvantage because the playing field is already uneven. That's what we mean when we say legacy of colonial education in Senegal or in Africa. So reimagining education in Senegal or in Africa, it requires us to reimagine the actual system, not just the actual curriculum and content, but the way it's delivered, how children engage with their community, how they see themselves in the community, the power dynamic between students and teachers, the power dynamic between school leaders and community. These are key elements of reimagining education in Africa. We actually need to make an education that is reflective of the communities and the children and their needs. What is the purpose of education in this community, and what are the needs of this children? That's where we need to begin when it comes to reimagining education. We also need to put African perspectives at the center Oftentimes, African children have been receivers of knowledge, but they have never been shown, or are not often shown, that they also stand on the shoulders of giants, that they come from producers of knowledge. So we need to put African perspectives and knowledge at the center when it comes to reimagining education and how we engage with our students. When we talk about Eurocentric education, it's reflective of the needs of children in Europe. When the kids in America or other parts of Europe learn about Shakespeare, when they learn about King Henry, when they learn about the history, they're told that they're producers of knowledge and that they also have the ability to achieve. So when we tell African children, or we start the history of Africa at slavery, they're told that their history only starts at slavery. We have to think back and put our indigenous knowledge, our history, beyond slavery. Slavery is a part of African history, but it is not the beginning. And so when we have to put that at the forefront of reimagining education on the continent. And a way to really push that forward is prioritizing African languages. African languages need to be seen as a valid form of expression and communication. In Senegal alone, we have over 20 different languages, but the only valid form of communication is French. I don't even want to go to Nigeria. I think you guys have over 200 something different languages, but the valid form of communication is English. So until we see African languages as languages of not only can knowledge be delivered but received, it would be doing our children a disservice and telling them that their languages, their culture does not matter. It also means fostering cultural pride and self-esteem. I think it's so important. I grew up in the US, but when I engage with my fellows, I want them to know that they can show up in their Senegalese clothing and speak in their Senegalese tongue, whether it's Wolof and Pular, and it still be legitimate. So it's important for us to allow our children, our fellows, to step in the global arena as their authentic self, pride of their culture, their heritage, their language. And we cannot do that unless it is delivered or seen in the educational system. One of the key important factors is really prioritizing African languages and also putting our culture, seeing as rich and diverse and not something that we should be embarrassed about. I think the stigma that comes from Africa and African cultures is that we are barbaric and we are behind. And once we show our children that they are okay as just who they are, that really enables them to thrive and fulfill their full potential, which what education really allows one to do. And when it comes to decolonizing education, I think it's a collective effort. It's not easy. All these things that I'm saying, of course, are not easy. But I think that there needs to be an important discussion about self-decolonization. Especially entrepreneurs, teachers on the continent, we have to remember that we are also a product of a Western system. Whether we've studied abroad or whether we have stayed in our country, we have somehow engaged with Western educational systems and have our own biases at what it means to be educated, what it means to be smart. I know that as soon as I open my mouth in Senegal and they hear my accent, there is this light that's like, she's educated, she knows what she's talking about, compared to my fellows who may have a Senegalese accent. They're seen as not as educated or not as legitimate. And so these biases that we carry within us really needs to be self-work. It requires a lot of self-reflection and self-awareness. I think that's where that conscious leadership comes in, which we do at Teach for Senegal, and I know other countries, network partners do a lot of. It requires collective action. It requires commitment from policymakers. It requires an engagement from community leaders, teachers, to really rethink and reimagine what does education look like in these communities, and how can we create a system that is reflective of that. Developing an African-centered education system. Like I said earlier, when we show our children that they come from producers of knowledge and that they stand on the shoulders of giants, it really does enable them to thrive. They need to have a deep sense of appreciation of self and ownership of their learning and then their own communities. So these are the efforts that really need to happen in order to decolonize educational efforts in Africa and and worldwide, really.
And let me start by giving you a context to education reforms in Kenya. First, before colonization, we also had a rich history, long history of indigenous education. And this was seen through the craft apprenticeship that happened at the community level. We had traditions of trades like blacksmiths, traditional doctors who learned through apprenticeship at the community level. We also had age-set schooling system, which relied a lot on oral traditions. We had cultural rites of passage, circumcision, which imparted very important life skills to young people. And then we also had madrasa system of Islamic education in the coastal regions of this country. And going back into ancient history, Africans also contributed to what is now known as Western education systems. I read in history that about 600 BC, Egypt was ruled by people, folks like me. And around about the same time, Thales Miletus studied in Egypt, and he was one of the brightest Greek mathematicians. He was able to estimate the height of pyramids in Egypt. So he studied in Egypt. And if it is true that the rulers of a country can influence the education system of that country, then it is right to say that folks like me also contributed to what we now know as Western education. And that's one way of also trying to decolonize education, by Africans seeking their rightful place in the acknowledgement of their contribution to what we now know as education. But we also have a very brief history of Westernized education in our country. And it started in around 1846 when the first Western education system was introduced through a school at the coastal region of Kenya. From the time Kenya was declared a British colony, the first effort to reform the education, the nascent education system, began in 1999. And there were a series of reforms that went on until 1949. And one feature of colonial education reform was actually to entrench a system of racial-based education. We had to, our folks studied in different color lines, yeah. And also, it's important to mention that, and this is something that was not said, colonial education introduced unprecedented forms of violence. My mother, I remember she told me in the 1950s, that's when she went to primary school, the officer who was in charge of education in her district would come to schools to inspect teaching process. And if he found that a teacher was not following the rules, he would administer corporal punishment on teachers. Now, that officer was a white folk. So you can imagine the embarrassment of your teacher being punished in front of your students. So that humiliation would definitely be visited upon the students by that teacher, and that institutionalized a great deal of violence in our education system. So after the colonial rule, 1963, there were efforts also to reform our education system. However, those reforms, they dismantled the racial-based education system, but introduced profound inequalities in our education system. And the inequalities were regional, and they're also class-based. So there's some sense of continuity in the post-colonial system from the colonial system. It's only until 2010 when Kenya adopted a new constitution, which is considered as the most progressive in terms of guaranteeing human rights, that we embarked on competency-based curriculum reforms. And the idea then was to align our education system to the new constitution, recognizing the right to education and also other rights, associated rights, cultural rights, and stuff like that. So this is where we are. We formally adopted this system in 2017. And there are opportunities for decolonizing the education system through this new system. Like, for instance, this system puts improvement of core competencies and promotes lifelong learning among the learners. And this is something that tries to cure one of the negative effects of the colonial education. It was quite wasteful. Right before the introduction of CBC, we had 8 out of 10 grade 3 students who could not read or solve numerical problems of grade 2 grade 2 class. So we had quite a wasteful education system. So now, by placing the learner at the center, I think this probably will improve the outcomes. Then secondly, the system also creates a role for the community. And I think this could take us back to re-indigenizing our education. Because as I said before colonialism, our education was communally based. The community did a lot of education for the children. And then the system also tries to empower parents to participate actively in the learning of their kids. The kids are required to take homework, do homework together with their parents, and report back. And there's also a system of accountability that's being introduced where the parent plays a significant role. And I think this also correlates positively with the role parents played in our indigenous forms of education before the advent of colonialism. Our system now is ingraining a value-based education, and some of the positive values we can see is like patriotism, and global citizenship. And I think this could help create a cultural foundation for our young people to reclaim the place of Africans in a global system of education. So yeah, it could help us reclaim the place of Africans in a global system of education by sensitizing them and giving them a sense of pride that they have a role to play in making scientific, cultural contributions to what we now know as the education system. However, there are some lessons that we are learning. Like, for instance, we've been challenged to indigenize our education system by promoting use of local languages. So Kenya is still years from, for instance, utilizing Kiswahili as a medium of instruction from the lowest level up to the highest level. So that's one area where we are lagging behind. Notwithstanding, Kiswahili is spoken by over 300 million people in Africa, and it could soon become, an international language. So the challenge, I guess, for our education system is to promote the use of Kiswahili. Then secondly is the cost of implementing this new system, because it would require massive change management, massive cultural transformation, especially among teachers. I mean, it will be difficult for teachers who've been trained in the old system to embrace the positive aspects of this system that could lead to decolonization, unless there's a deliberate effort to retrain and foster inculcation of values that will promote what we're talking about here. And that comes with cost. Also, sensitizing communities, sensitizing parents to embrace their new role in this new system. Then lastly, I think it's important to anchor our new education system on a bigger or grander vision of civilization by Africans. And the reason why I say that is Western civilization as we know it, and the fact that it's also anchored on a Western form of education, there are concerns that it could be leading our planet to the brink of extinction, the climate change emergency and all those. And therefore, there is need for us now to think of an alternative form of civilization that is in line with safeguarding human beings as also safeguarding our planet. And I see a contribution by Africans. I see a role that Africa can play and through its education system. But this can only be possible if we take this ambition to the highest levels of governance on this continent. The African Union needs to take an interest in ensuring harmonized curriculum reform in the entire continent. And that has to be scaled down to regions, the regional economic blocks, and to all countries. And with that, I thank you for listening.
We Africans do not present ourselves from what we did or what we gained in this school or that school. We are of lineage. So I am the daughter of Marie-Christine Domerson and Louis Auguste, the granddaughter of, the great-granddaughter of, the great-great-granddaughter of, mother of 4, grandmother of 10, grandma of 4. All right. Ubuntu, humanityness. That's what's at the heart of African education. In Kemet, for example, the 3 fundamental elements to learning is music, astronomy, and geometry. Not reading and writing and arithmetic. Music. Until today, we have that as our base for everything we do. How did we start this conference today? Music, dancing, getting the right vibration, getting everyone connected. That's what education is all about. It's not about sitting in some place in books and papers and that, no. These things have made of us parakeets. In large quantities, we do not know how to think through things. We recite. Colonization is a crime. Let's be clear about it. And it's not something of little details. Colonization has transformed how you view yourself. When you look in the mirror as a colonized person, you say, oh, my lips is too, my hair is too, my skin is too. You can't look at yourself and say, hey, I'm gorgeous, I'm beautiful. That's what colonization does. Colonization makes it so you're not comfortable dressing like your mother or your grandmother. You're looking at people you don't know nothing about, you don't know their reasons for anything, and you're dressing like them. So you're not being yourself. And so colonization makes you someone who have no knowledge of your own true self. Not knowing who you are, you cannot love yourself. Not knowing who you are, you cannot love those who look like you. Not knowing who you are, you cannot practice Ubuntu. You cannot practice Ubuntu. You cannot sing Kofa, turn back and learn from your experience so you can grow. When we're talking about decolonization, we're talking about serious work, individual work that each one of us must do for self. We are talking about changing content, ethos, methods, techniques. We're not talking about little changes here and there. And we cannot conceive of a decolonization program created by the colonizers. That is absolute madness. Yes, we are sick. We are sick. Sick? What's the word? I'm missing there. We're not well. We need healing. When you are a colonized person, you are not well. You look at yourself in the mirror and you don't see yourself good looking. You think you're ugly. No, that's an illness. And we must cure ourselves. As mothers, as parents, as teachers, we all complain about the governments we have. Well, what do we expect from people who do not know who they are? Sorry. I'm the president here. You're complaining you don't have any water? What's the problem? Okay, collect me all this water here, send it to my house. It's because he has, that's why he's complaining. He has too much. Remove what he's got. That's the mental colonized, the perception of authority we have is the slaver and the colonizer. That's the reality. And if we're not going to face up to that, we're not talking about changing. If we just change a few books or take these books we have and put them in Kiswahili, put them in Haitian, no, that is not change. We have a totally different concept. They say day and night. We say night and day. Night was there before day. Light came out of darkness. Darkness created everything. That's the premise from which we must create. The colonizer have given us the impression we've done nothing. Well, I'm not going to go through all of this because you will have it, you can read it. But I'll go through a couple of images. Darkness. You can't be afraid of darkness. Kemet calls it noon. That muddy, dark water where everything is created out of. That's you. You must know who you are. And you must know that everything that exists has come from you. Light has come from you. And everything else. So, that means there is nothing that you cannot do. So, while fighting Haitian, who built this? A citadel able to house more than 20,000 soldiers and withstand and be besieged for a year without any problem. Straight out of slavery. We built this in 11 years. It's considered one of the eighth wonder of this world. But of course, you will know about it because it's not in France. It's not in Germany. It's not in British. You would know about it. Right here at home, the university, you can read better than me. I can't see when I look up that way. What is it called? Yes. How many Malians don't even know that they had, in the year 800, created, built universities, and people came from all over the world to study here. So, how do we undo colonization? How do we remove it from our perceptions, from our minds, from our heart? Step number 1, zero. Before step 1, what must we do? Conscious and continuous questioning. Conscious and continuous questioning. All of the maps you have in the books you're teaching the children are false. They take pictures of the map of Africa on one scale and pictures of the map of fake continent Europe. Fake. It's not a continent. A continent, they say, is a large mass of land surrounded by water. Europe is neither a large mass of land nor surrounded by water. But we teach our children that. Nonsense. So, to begin your freedom, you must begin by questioning everything. Whatever comes in front of you, you must question. Questioning helps you to go to step number one, which is what? What's the first thing you need? Courage. In the curriculum, we must teach courage. And courage begins by questioning. Efficient. What is courage? Fears. All of us have fears. Everybody has fear. Even though I've been talking in front of people since I was, 18, 20. I'm 75. When they say Baina Bello, I still. Yes, we all have fear. So it's not being fearless. It's knowing that the fear is there, you handle it. That's what courage is all about. We must teach our children courage. Step number 2. If you have no courage, you cannot speak. Because speaking is not repeating what others say. Oh, Dr. So-and-so said, Dr. So-and-so said, European nation says. No. If you to speak, you to do what? Yes. You must express your own conviction. If you have not questioned anything, you do not know what your convictions are. Then you can, with courage, you can speak. Number 3, observation. Everywhere you are, everything that is alive has spirit. And every spirited element communicate. So the bird, the tree, the sea, the sun, all of it is communicating. But do you pay attention? Do you observe? Next step, number 4, meditation. As you learn from the outer world, you bring it into your inner universe. So you can figure out what you need right now in order to go forward. So meditation, internal observation, and questioning. When you have question, courage, speaking, observation, meditation, you now can do action. You cannot do action without having questioned everything thoroughly. What is the first question we must ask? I know they have conditioned you to think, what? But no, the first question is why. If you can answer the why, you will know the who, the what, the where, etc. So always go for the why first. That's the most important. Action, creation. Action is what you do for yourself. Action is where you learn, you experiment. But creation, once you start learning how to do, you want to do something for the collective. Something that you don't expect anything in return for. Just because you were given life, you were given opportunities, so you want to create for others. That's what you do. And every time you've gone through questioning, courage, speaking, observation, meditation, action, creation, you have a degree of knowledge of self. If you have never questioned anything, I know the Quran by heart. Who cares? I know the Bible by heart. So what? You can't explain any of it. You can't use one sentence from any of these books to improve your life now. Because all you know how to do is parakeet. You recite. You want to know. To know, you must question. And We won't go to the other side, but just know everything has its opposite. If you're not building courage, if you don't question anything, you're not building courage. If you're not building courage, what are you building? Cowardness. That's why it's easy for others to order you around, to tell you what to do, to tell you what you like. Fashion. Oh, that's the latest blah, blah, blah. I gotta have it. Why? What is it gonna do for you? But you've been conditioned to want whatever they put in front of you in a certain way. No. Every time you say, I gotta have this bag, ask yourself, why? What is it going to do that the other bags you have cannot do? Ask yourself why. You will become richer. You will spend your money wisely. So, no courage. If you don't build courage, you will build cowardice. You don't know how to speak, you don't have convictions, you will live with submission. You don't do observation, you will live with illusion. You don't do meditation, you will live with supplication and blame. There is a problem. You know, I got pregnant from this brother. What do you think I should do with the baby? She didn't know I was having any relationship with the brother. How can she now be responsible to tell me what to do with my baby? But that's what we do when we don't have courage. We want someone else to decide for us. And you know what happened? If she says, keep the baby, I'm going to blame her. At 75, you want me to keep a baby. What am I going to do with this child? If she says, don't keep the baby, you see, she doesn't like me. She doesn't want me to have a child. You will be guilty no matter what. But when people are functioning like this, they always blame someone else for whatever happens. You cannot do actions. You can only do reaction. And people control you with that. You don't think. I know if I say this word, you'll get angry. And you get angry, you storm out of the room. Good. I wanted you out of the room because I wanted to say something I didn't want you to hear. Reactions. Think, decide. Don't react. And also, we love appearances. Since we have no whys to anything we say, everything is about what it looks like, not what it does. What's the purpose? What's the aim? Where is my interest? Where is our collective interest? Ubuntu is not there. So, these are to me the steps to regaining ourselves. And history has a lot to do with it. If you don't know much about history, and we're not talking about 2-3 years. I'm glad the sister mentioned how you can't start your history with 1492 Christopher Columbus. Please. That's garbage. Or slavery. That's garbage. Africa has a history minimum 100,000 years. So what are we talking about when we're limiting it to 500-600 years? That's nonsense. No, you gotta know your history. All of many times I hear people talking about, what's this thing there? Les droits de l'homme, les droits internationaux, bagay, Nations Unies. What is it they call it? Human rights or something, whatever. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm speaking French too. Okay. Anyway, so they have this thing that the UN has, no, not watch. The International Human Rights something, whatever. Huh? They always quote it. All government has to quote that to say, that's where democracy begins. That's garbage. Merci. Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Yes. In 1221, in Mali, Sundiata Keita declared end to slavery, end to this, that, and the other behavior, and that people were free. Sundiata Keita in Mali, 1221. Go check it out. Don't quote yesterday's jerk. And how can an enslaver tell you how to be free? Let's be for real. So history is important. Not 2 decades, 10 decades, 2 centuries. Get to some real history so you can be guided and retain this word, Sankofa. What do you do when you Sankofa? Let's all Sankofa. Turn back. When we talk about the ancestors, we are Sankofa. You remember this ancestor who did this. We remember Thomas Sankara. We remember Olympia of Togo. That is Sankofa. We talk about this Musa of Mali. That is Sankofa. You look back so you learn. You take strength. You take knowledge. And you can progress. You can Sankofa studying Napoleon. This is the first Empress of Haiti. After independence, in October 1804, we created an empire. On the letterhead of the emperor and empress, it's Haiti Empire of Freedom. We won't have time to go into it, just a mention here. But we have many rulers in our history that have done great things. But we tend not to know them because we are inside a colonial, enslaved, miseducation system. We live on the richest continent and everybody is poor. Does it make sense? Is it logical? I live on the richest spot in the Americas, Haiti, the island of Haiti. We have iridium, diamond, petrol, bauxite, you name it, we've got it. And then those who are stealing our wealth label in all their writing, Haiti, the poorest country in the world. We gotta collect little clothing, shoes you don't need, let me take it to them. That's how it goes. And they do the same thing with all the rich countries. The Congo is the same, Nigeria is the same. Every time you hear somebody talking about the poorest country, question it. Why? In size, our continent is, you could put everybody that calls themselves a big country inside Africa and there'll still be more space. But are you aware of that? No, because those fake maps make you think differently. So, Sankofa, return and collect your stolen memories so you can grow powerful and share prosperity with everyone. Thank you.
This discussion of decolonizing our education is more important yesterday than today. And it will still be more important today than yesterday. It depends on how you view it. It's very difficult to speak after professors, very difficult to speak after future leaders or today's leaders. So please quote me not wrong if I contradict with them. I am a teacher, and today I wake up in the morning, and I told myself I want to dress like this. So when I dressed like this, I woke up and moved around, and I met one of my friends who told me, "Oh, boy, that really? You're dressed like this?" I'm like, "What's up?" I got confused. Am I smart? Am I not smart? What's happening? We are 2 people here seated in this room. One perhaps may be in Europe. The other may perhaps be in Africa. And I want to ask you a honest question. For people from Africa, do I look like a witch doctor? Do I look like a local person? If somehow you think that is true, then you need to decolonize your mind. If you're from Europe and you're looking at me and you're seeing a poor African, if you're looking at me and you're saying that I am a local man from somewhere deep down village in Africa, then you need to decolonize your mind. This is my tradition and this is what I represent. Now, I want to put some things straight. That education that was brought to Africa by colonial powers was not meant to develop Africa. It was meant to enslave our minds such that we should not realize what was bad and what was wrong. My father used to tell me a story that you cannot teach a lion how to hunt goats as a hunter, because one day you will get no goats to eat as a hunter. So rather teach a lion how not to eat goats, such that you, the hunter, will get how to eat goats. What does that mean? Colonialists knew that if we train these Africans in the correct education on how to liberate themselves, they will never accept us to rule them. So what we do, let's manage their minds such that they start thinking that we are better than them, such that we can extort resources from Africa. So don't be fooled that the modern education was the most intelligent one. How does this manifest in our classrooms? You know, this dress code of mine costed me my job 3 weeks ago. I went into my school. I'm a biology teacher, and I was teaching about feathers in birds. I was teaching about birds. So for me, in my thinking, teach for Uganda, Kasaga, teach for all is telling me, you need to empower those kids, you need to do this, you need to do this. So I wake up and say, today I want to empower these people. I want to teach them the biology, the science, the culture, and everything in right concoction. I enter into the classroom, and my kids were super excited to see me. They're like, wow, sir, you're putting on the feathers. Wow, what's this? We had the best lesson I have ever taught, because we discussed how important our feathers was, not just the science that we teach in class. Now I was being waited by my head teacher. He told me, Obore, this is not acceptable. He had printed 5 copies of the code of conduct and dress code of teachers in schools. And when you read the code of conduct and dress code of teachers in Uganda, you must dress on a blue shirt, put on a necktie, and put on a coat. He told me, Obore, don't make our school local. How you look like a witch doctor? Can't you even be ashamed of yourself? I'm like, surely. So he gave me a suspension of 1 day. Perhaps I'll get back there dressed not like this, but I'll never accept that. So that's how the curriculum that Europeans brought to our schools actually colonized our minds. And up to today, even our educators still think that what was written in the 90s by the whites is still right. Tell me how a smartly dressed child that we think he is. They told us that our children should dress in uniform. Moreover, which type of uniform? White shirts and black shoes. White shirts, put on black shoes, such that you step on your color, but you must keep your white shirt clean. Tell me, how does a smartly dressed child who is dressed on a white shirt and black shoes go into an agricultural farm to learn how to heap sweet potatoes? Never. How does a smartly dressed child who is dressed smartly on a white shirt go into a lake to learn how to swim and learn an ecosystem of the lake? The whites never wanted us to learn that. Now that's where indigenizing our education actually becomes more important, you guys. I am sure people from Europe will visit around Kenya. Please, you will find some people dressed half naked, moving with baskets going to the swamp. Don't think they are local. Don't think they are poor. They are simply going to fish. And that's how you dress when you're going to fish. I am sure you will meet some people dressed in a funny way. Perhaps barefooted. Perhaps putting on lugabires down, car tires. They are not poor. They are simply dressed to go and hunt. The traditional education, the indigenous education, was meant to solve current issues in the communities. The education that we are teaching our children right now is the education of controlling the mind and make us start thinking that there are problems that we shall solve next year. Ask me why. I started in primary school, and my teacher spent 7 years teaching me that the name of our lake in Uganda called Lake Victoria is actually Lake Victoria. And he could cane me that is Lake Victoria. Obore, that is Lake Victoria. I go and ask my grandfather that, surely, is that Lake Victoria? No, it is not called Lake Victoria. It's called Lake Nalubale, the lake of the gods that Africans used to pray from. Our teachers never want us to teach about that. And they think that's being local. No. John Speak comes from Europe to my village in Uganda. And he comes and tells us that he has discovered the source of River Nile. Discovering the source of River Nile? Yet my father used to go there to bathe. Are you sure? And we, the teachers, are very busy beating our children that they are failing exam. That John Speak is the person who discovered the source of River Nile. Are you sure? Are we serious enough? We must decolonize our education. We must decolonize our education. Now, there are certain things that must change. I was happy when I woke up and came to Kenya. And when I came to Kenya, they told me the airport in Kenya is Jomo Kenyatta. I'm like, wow, Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, not Queen Elizabeth Airport. No, Jomo Kenyatta. I was actually happy when I went to Tanzania and they renamed their lake to Lake Tanganyika, not Queen something or Bishop So Lake. We must indigenize the learning that we do in our classrooms. We must, and we must do it now. Now, colonial education had one tough weapon that fought us, and that's the language. I'm sure most of you will agree with me that Obore speaks good English, so he must be an intelligent man. You man, that guy can speak English. I hate my teacher because the first revolution that I caused was in P5. You know, I was a sharp student, but I was very poor in English. So what did our teacher do? He gets that girl who came from the Kampala school. The girl knew a lot of English. When she speaks English, everyone would know that, yeah, she's speaking. So the teacher secretly gives her a note that your work is to pass that paper to whoever spoke in the what? The local language. So the paper was passed. At the end of the evening, an assembly comes and the teacher says, Akelo, where is my paper? Akelo will say, I gave it to Obore. Obore, where is my paper? I gave it to Kasaga. Kasaga, where is my paper? I gave it to Jane. Okay, all that group come here. Lie down. How dare you speak the local language in this school? We were caned as if we were bewitched, but that was not the case. What was this teacher telling us? He was simply telling us that my language is never to be used in an institution. It is a local language. Rubbish. Don't speak it here. What was he teaching me? English is the measure of intellect. If you can speak good English, then you are intellectual enough. Are you sure? I was passing science, but I was getting an F9 in English. Do you treat me as being dull? English isn't my language. You get? As the paper was being passed, in the evening, who we were caned actually had a revolution. We agreed we must get that girl, cane her. Whether she will die or not, we must cane her. And in actual sense, we did that. We caned her. But in the next morning, we were also caned. Now, the colonialist education, colonial institutions knew that the African kind of education was the Ubuntu we're talking about. Togetherness. Let's learn as a community. Let's unite together. So they knew that was happening. So what do? Let's bring these children to an institution and we start teaching them to divide themselves there. So now in our classroom, we knew that there was a traitor around, even though we don't know who. But we know there's somebody who is having a paper here, so you have to be critical. Maybe it's this one. I can't, maybe. So colonialists had to find a way of dividing us in our own institutions. And the problem is just one. We, as teachers, have also inherited the same perspective. We also want to continue telling our children that they must speak good English. Good English for what? I was in Nepal. Their curriculum is being taught in Nepali. English is just a subject. I'm like, you guys can do these things? They're like, yes. When did Chinese came to Africa to study about your language? Has an American never asked you that I want to learn your Luganda, I want to learn your Kiswahili? Never. But we are the ones saying we must learn English. We must do this. We must change. Let's allow these children to express themselves in the language that they understand the best. That's what learning should be. Learning should start from our culture. Let's allow these children to dress in a manner that helps them to recognize where they came from. We must do that. I am a science teacher. You know what? I ask myself, is the science I'm teaching really is relevant or irrelevant? Can you imagine? I teach my students the parts of a cockroach. How many legs does a mosquito have? Those are the lessons I go. I am teaching my secondary school student how many legs a cockroach has. But Chinese are teaching them, their children, how to go to the moon. What are we teaching? But when we go to our curriculum, that's what they are prescribing. I am always told to be an arrogant teacher, a misconceptualized teacher in my school. So one time, I'm teaching about bones. So I tell my students, you know what? Today I'm not going to teach you. Go to the traditional herbalist. You know, in Teso, we have a clan called the Clan of Vinom. They are the experts in repairing broken bones. Even before the whites came, they were repairing broken bones. So I told them, we are studying about bones. Me, I don't know about them. Go to the traditional herbalist. He will tell you how to repair bones. They went there. They came back excited. They learned the trees, the concoctions that they can use to tie the leg and make the bone straight. My head teacher again comes, oh, boy, what are you doing? I am like, what? You want to turn this school into a traditional hub? Why are you sending our children to witch doctors? I am like, what do you mean being a witch doctor? If he can pass the knowledge that is relevant, I actually ask him, has your leg ever gotten broken? He's like, I've ever heard of some people. Can't that man repair? He's like, yeah, I've heard he's repairing some people. I'm like, so what? Let's then get that knowledge and we pass it to these children. Guys, teachers, let's not undermine our indigenous knowledge. Yes, it's true. We must learn about astronomy. We must learn about high-tech. We must learn about Google and so forth. But we must we must conserve our knowledge. We must have it conserved. If we don't, then we might not make it. Now, this is, I actually contradict with a number of people. Today, some speaker was telling us that he's so proud that he has taught his children, now they have gone to Europe. Why are they going to Europe? Why are they not remaining here in Africa? You're telling them to go to Europe to do what? You're leaving your brother dying in Africa and you're excited that I'm going to Europe. Me, Obore, I will not come to your country in Europe. Never. I'll remain here. Why are we producing our children and they are excited of leaving Kenya to go to London, to go to New York? It is because of you, the teacher. That's what you teach them. When you go to our classrooms, the posters that you have there is Barack Obama, you have Pope Francis, you have Queen Elizabeth, you have Malcolm X. Who is the greatest leader in the world? Barack Obama. Who is the... You guys, have you forgotten that we have Kwame Nkrumah? Have you forgotten that we have Jomo Kenyatta? Have you forgotten that we have Nelson Mandela? Have you forgotten that we have so many great leaders that Africa has ever produced? Why are you telling them that America has the greatest leaders? That's not true. We must change that as leaders. And can we go ahead to symbolize our education system? How do we symbolize it? If we are speaking of great leaders, let's have great leaders portrayed here, like the Jomo Kenyattas and so forth. Let's have our roads named after our African leaders here. Let's have our national parks named after our African people. If we are to decolonize our minds, if we are to decolonize our education and re-indigenize it, then we must accept the real fact that the education that was brought for us was not meant to make us better. It was meant to control us. And if that is the case, then let's think of how to develop it. I am not undermining the fact that there is actually interest in making our education better. the minister was speaking of competence-based curriculum and so forth. But to be honest, don't tell him. Yes, we have great curriculums developed. But you ask him, how much money has the government of Kenya allocated to that curriculum? How much training has the government of Kenya given to teachers to make sure that that curriculum is implemented? Nothing. African leaders have the interest to make changes, but they cannot because they are still being controlled by the West. If China has not given them money, then how will they implement? If America has not given money, how? You leaders, please spare 1% to our education. You leaders, please start making decisions outside China, outside America. And finally, let's not think that we are decolonizing our minds. Let also think that they are still coming back to recolonize us. It was slavery. We accepted them. They actually told us, I can give you a mirror. Then you give me 5 people. They enslaved us. Another person came and told us, you people, I can give you the Bible, but give me land such that I can construct a church. They colonized us. Today, China is here in Africa. China is not here to play. He's here to reap our resources. Today, as we are speaking, Kenya has a base, a military base for Russians, a military base for Chinese, a military base for Americans. What is this military for? Colonizing us, please. Let's change the way we think. I thank you so much.